Just Google the word recession. You're going to get no fewer than a dozen stories about how one is right around the corner. But what does that really mean? And especially if you're retired or you're looking to retire soon, what does it actually mean for you? In this episode of the Retire Once Show, we're going to dig into exactly how a recession can impact your retirement. Hello and welcome to the Retire Once Show, the show designed to help you get to retirement, but most importantly, stay retired. I'm your host, Johnathan Rankin, and I am here with my lovely co-host.
Hi, I'm Melissa Rankin.
And we are ready to talk about the recession.
In this riveting episode number 6.
That's right. You know, everywhere you turn, it seems like everybody's talking about the next recession. Is it coming? Is it here? I mean, I did a Google search. I just typed in the word recession, and these are the articles that came up. So we've got number 1, Dallas Fed warns cutoff of Russian energy could cause global recession. Bloomberg, a possible recession in the next year, ? And that was on their radio show. My favorite by far from the Wall Street Journal, yield curve almost flashes recession. Maybe, but who knows when? Could you be more vague?
I was just going to say, so we're getting a lot of maybe, possibly, almost.
That's it. I'm going out on a limb. I'm going to say, that's it. Right now, a recession is coming at some point in the future over the next 30 years.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. You heard it at the Wall Street Journal first.
You almost heard it there.
But you heard it here first. If you're watching this, you saw it here first. A recession's coming at some point in the next 30 years. Quote me, Wall Street Journal.
30 years?
Well, so that is what we're going to be talking about today, is exactly how does a recession impact you if you are retired, if you're on the verge of retirement, or retirement's coming in the next couple of years, or you're just thinking about it, or even if you're years away from retirement. That's what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into that, make sure that if you're watching this, to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Dad, for you, that's that red button that says subscribe. I know he hasn't done this yet, so just take your finger and put it right there, and then just push it. Just push the button. Just bing, and then you're going to get notified. I say bing. It's bing. It's not boop. Bing. Now I'm saying bing. So anyway, Father, you in the camera, I'm watching you. Subscribe. And everybody else, all the millions of people that were rivaling Joe Rogan, subscribe to this. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, also subscribe. And for everything that we talk about, we're going to link it in the show notes so you can check those out as well. We've got plenty of stories down there that talk about all the different topics we're going through today. So with that, recession.
I was going to say, before we get crazy into it and how it affects everybody, what is a recession? Let's start there. Let's start at the very beginning. What is a recession?
So the very beginning, whenever you hear the word recession, you're going to hear people talking about 2 consecutive quarters of GDP decline. Now, for most people, that means nothing. Okay, what does this really mean? How does it impact me? But really what that means is we've got shrinking production and shrinking consumption. So people are spending less, businesses are producing less. So that's what's technically happening from an economic standpoint. But most people,
pretty easy.
It is, but how does it actually impact someone who's watching this, or you or myself? That's what really matters. What we hear on TV or economists talking about technicalities, but what we see, how it impacts people is, let's look at what actually happens in a recession. So as we talked about, shrinking production. So businesses are starting to take a hit. Their profits are going down. They're starting to reduce their production because demand's not there. So they're likely to start cutting back on their employment. The people that are working there, that's why you typically see unemployment rise, because businesses cut back or they shut down. You see people save more. And
so not a lot of shopping going on.
No, not a lot.
That's basically what you're getting at.
Exactly. Because what happens is when there's a recession and people start seeing others in their neighbors or their friends start losing their job, they get worried that they might be next. And so they just kind of go into this hunker down mode and start saving more. And a lot of people think, well, it's a good thing. But there was this quote by an old economist, this famous quote that said, one person's spending is another person's income. So if you think about it, it's like a downward spiral. If you stop
like a
spending,
domino effect.
That's it. And if you stop spending, well, then a business is not going to earn money, and that business has to lay off someone else who then isn't going to spend, and it just kind of trickles down. And that's why in recessions we see unemployment rise as well. So also in a recession we can see prices fall. Now I know right now with high levels of inflation and gas prices near all-time highs, the Fed's working to combat that. And Melissa's laughing right now because we just took a road trip and I complained the whole time about gas prices.
And I just have to say, I know they're high and I'm not trying to discount that fact. However, you would have thought it was like $15 a gallon the way he was talking about it. And I don't mean talking, I mean complaining at every, 50 miles when we passed a gas station.
I am prudent. That's the way. I am prudent. And yeah, some would like to call it cheap, but yes, cheap, prudent, same thing. But it is high, and I know the Fed's working on that. So in a recession, we do see prices fall. But one thing on our road trip, if anybody out there knows the age at which your almost 5-year-old son will actually take a road trip without talking your ear off the whole time, please let me know. That was a long
because so far it's not 4.
No, it's not 4. 12 hours of nonstop. Daddy, what is that? Daddy, what's that? What about that? What kind of truck is that? That's what we heard for 12
Lots of questions.
Hours. It was a long time.
If you're familiar with Jerry Maguire, it was pretty much like the scene where the little kid asks nonstop questions about the zoo, or is that what he talks about? Yes. The zoo or something? That was Harvey. Every single thing we passed, every car, every truck, he wanted to know all of it.
The bleeping zoo's closed, Ray. That's my favorite quote from. And now he doesn't say bleeping, but this is a family show. It's a retirement show. We're not here to curse and use lewd language.
Crude,
lewd, same thing. Anyway, okay, so back to the recession. Right. So prices fall, banks start to lend less because with people out of work, they're fearful that people are unable to pay their debts, so they get a little bit more tight on who they're lending to. And I mean, the reality is people out of work do sometimes struggle to pay their debt, especially if they can't find a job pretty soon. And then at the same time, we see interest rates fall. Now, I know it's counterintuitive because right now interest rates are rising and we're hearing a lot about prices rising because of inflation. So we're not here to say that we're in a recession right now. We're just helping you prepare for what happens if we end up going that route. So
in the next 30 years.
In the next 30 years. At some point in the next 30 years, you heard it here first on the Retire Once show.
So with all that in mind, I mean, now that we know what a recession is, how does it actually affect people? How does it affect people who aren't even close to retirement? Just your regular working people who are still, 9-to-5ing it, I guess, if you will.
So I look at this, this demographic of people of having really 2 risks. They've got one, the financial asset risk. So we know that asset price or prices fall, which also means houses typically fall in price. We're seeing right now stocks fall. We saw that in 2008. We saw that in the pandemic recession. It was brief, but stocks fell. .com stocks fell during that recession. Now, like we talked about in one of our previous episodes, stocks don't always fall during a recession, but it tends to happen, and it's happened over the past 3 recessions. So something to be aware of. But then you also have the risk of losing your financial income, which, losing your job. If you're not ready to retire, that could be your biggest risk. And so
that would have a huge impact if you're not, ready to retire or have a nest egg, if you will, to kind of see you through that. So I can see why that's a huge concern.
Yeah, we saw that in 2008 when working with clients and they were maybe 5 to 10 years away from retirement, and all of a sudden their company started shutting down and they were out of work for a year or 2 years, and it created a struggle for everything. So when we talk about the first risk, financial assets, so what can you do if we're headed towards or we're in a recession, just to help alleviate that risk a little bit? We'll start by assessing your risk appetite. It's something that you want to consistently update, meaning how much risk are you able to take? What can you tolerate? Because the last thing you want to do is make a bad decision, like pulling all of your money out of your investment strategy just because you lost your job and now, the market's down, and you think about how that can really have a compounding effect long-term on your wealth. Use this time to monitor your expenses and try to cut where possible, whether that's little things like subscriptions. I saw a study that the average person has like $500 in unused subscriptions per year.
You mean like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon?
Or your car wash.
I was just going to say, I'm not canceling the car wash.
She has not gotten
Dallas,
her car.
I do get my car washed.
Yeah, one time every 6 weeks. That does not justify a monthly subscription to a car wash.
So this is a prime example. I'm not going to cancel mine. However, this is a prime example of something that could be canceled.
I'm monitoring that expense, and I am looking to cut that expense. So that is one thing you could do is you can cut out your wife's car wash expense, like I will. Make sure you build an emergency fund. So have at least 6 months to 12 months of just cash savings in the bank. So if something were to happen, you have that to fall back on. Because on the job front, it really, that second risk, that financial income risk, that's the real risk, I think, for this group, because you probably have 10 plus years to retirement. So yes, financial assets going down, eventually we know they come back over time, but it's that financial income. So I look at the industry.
The money coming in. I mean, that's a huge risk.
Well, look at we talked about that chart from Deloitte that said, what industries were more, stable.
Highest impact.
Yeah, and the highest impact. So you look at, what was it? Mining, logging, manufacturing, construction. All those industries had over a 10% employment decline during recessions. Whereas teachers and healthcare, they had less than 1%. So being in one of those more susceptible industries, this might prompt you to really start looking at what you're doing on the financial side, but also what are you doing on the job front? Just because we're not in a recession right now doesn't mean that we're not going to one. As we talked about, in the next 30 years, we'll be in one. But use this time for updating your resume, just to have it ready to go.
Oh, that's smart.
Build out and become active on LinkedIn if you're not already. That is one of the most powerful places from a job search front. It's your resume, but it's also your network. So, I saw
employers use it too.
Use it all the time.
It's huge.
I saw a statistic: over 55 million companies are on LinkedIn, and
55 million.
55 million, and there are 87% of recruiters use LinkedIn as a site. So you think about, one, you're getting in front of companies, you're getting in front of recruiters, but also use this time to reconnect with old colleagues that might have moved on to a different position at a different company, that if something happened to your role, maybe you can transition with them, or maybe they know somebody. But it's a great time before a recession to start putting those feelers out there.
Before you need the favor and you're looking for a job, at least then you've already had the, oh, hey, remember me? Not, oh, by the way.
Yeah, you want to be fresh in someone's mind if something happened. There are also courses on how to find a job during challenging times. Now, they rolled this out in the pandemic when there was a lot of job loss then, but there's still those courses there, and they teach a lot of good things. So use this time just to prepare not just your finances, but prepare your life, prepare your budget, prepare your family. This isn't like shelter in place with a tornado warning or those old school nuclear bomb warnings where you just sit under your desk like that's going to do anything.
I think that was for earthquakes.
I thought it was. I did them for nuclear bombs.
Okay.
So if we got into a nuclear bomb situation, you get under your desk and that's going to save you.
That's going to save you. The little desk didn't it just have the top?
Just the top. Yep.
Yeah.
You opened it and everything like that. But this, I hate to be doom and gloom and say, well,
I know you sound like some of those news articles.
Start prepping yourself and it's not go to Costco and get the big thing of food that you're going to use just to, feed your family if we go into a
the
bunker.
5-gallon bucket.
Yeah. But just be smart, prepare yourself for something that might happen. And let's hope it doesn't. But if we go into recession, we know that employers cut back on their employees. And if that happens to impact you, at least you'll be ready for it. Now that's for people who are just years away from retirement, 10 plus years. But
what about the next stage of life where you're, let's say, thinking about retirement, or maybe not super close, but within the 5 to 10 years, like you said. So it's definitely on your mind. You're thinking about it. It's a little more immediate, I guess.
We run into this group a lot, and we have in the past 2 recessions, 2008 and then the pandemic, where we've done a lot of retirement planning, and maybe retirement was a year or 2 years away that we were forecasting. And so recession comes. Once again, use this time to cut out your wife's car wash if it's not being used, and just manage your overall expenses.
It's being used.
But I would say start now by modeling your retirement plan as if you stopped working today. So what does that look like? If you stop working today, but you've been planning on retiring in the next 1 to 2 years. So let's say that your retirement plan has you stopping or retiring January 1st of 2024. Okay, well, that's a little over a year and a half away, and you're on track, everything's going well, but what happens if you retire today? What does that look like? Because losing your job might not be a risk, and I've seen it dozens of times where it was actually a blessing because the company that they were working for offered a severance, and so the amount of people that I've seen raise their hand asking to be terminated.
Me.
Yeah, getting a severance was actually a good thing. So just model out your retirement, and then make sure that your retirement savings is properly allocated to handle volatility. And we did talk about that in our volatility episode, where making sure that you are updating that risk tolerance and that you're taking on the proper amount of risk after 3 years of really good market returns.
But you should be doing that anyway.
Yeah, that should
regularly, especially if you're that close to retirement.
Yeah, and that's where we've seen after 3 years of good market returns, some of those things have gotten a little out of whack, and so now is a great time to just reassess that part of it. And a lot of that is if you do retire, let's say you have to retire immediately or in the next couple months because a recession comes and you're offered a severance, well, so you want to make sure that your portfolio is prepared for sequence of return risk as well that we hear about quite a bit.
Hang on, what sequence of return risk?
The sequence of return risk is the risk that the market drops early on in retirement while you're starting to take retirement distributions. And that can really impact the longevity of your portfolio. And you've seen projections where if you're taking out 5% a year, but then in that first or second year of retirement, you've got a 10% correction, that can have a long-term effect of you running out of money maybe at year 15 or 16 or even sooner.
Isn't that what the 4% rule is for?
It is. The 4% rule was research that was done to show that 4% was deemed a safe withdrawal rate, adjusting for inflation, to have a portfolio last for 30 years and generate income. Now,
so to basically see you through retirement.
Exactly. And so it has shown that anytime you retire in this research, it showed that even if you retired in 1929, before the major crash, you actually still never ran out of money using that 4% withdrawal rate. So that is one thing I will say. Sequence of return is a risk, but every time you look it up, they're always talking about a 5 or 6% withdrawal rate, and it's usually a lot higher than that 4%. So if you're sticking to that 4% rule, I think you're doing okay.
It's generally a safe bet.
Yeah, and you can also, one way to mitigate the sequence of return risk is to use what's called dynamic spending. So you get to spend more in.
I like that.
Yeah, I know you spend more. That means less car washes, more subscriptions. So you can spend more when the market does well, but you have to be willing to spend less when we're in a bad market or even freeze distribution. So you have to be flexible if you're using a dynamic spending, but it is one way to help mitigate the risk. But to me, one of the biggest risks there is on top of the sequence of returns is how to handle that mentally. You just retire, you have no more income from a stable salary that you're used to, and now the market's falling. You're starting to take withdrawals out. And I think that's why the bucket strategy does make sense. If just to help someone stick with an investment strategy. So if you
can try to avoid any of the knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah. So if you just now retire, but you have, let's say, call it 2 years of retirement reserves just in that first immediate bucket, that means you can let your long-term stocks just continue to go up and down over the next 5+ years. You're going to feel a lot more confident than if everything was just in one portfolio and you started watching
the whole thing plummet.
Yep.
I mean, that's
it just mentally, each investor is different, but I've seen that the bucket strategy really helps just with that mental accounting of being able to separate out what's immediate for now, reassuring a client, you're going to be okay for the next 2 to 3 or however long that first bucket is set up for, and then from there you have time for your long-term assets, your stocks, to come back over time.
Okay, so that's for the people who are close to retirement within a few years. What about when you're already retired? I mean, that, like you said, that just seems scary. I can't imagine. You're like, okay, I just stopped with my regular income and now I'm this and the world around me is ending.
Well, so it depends on if you just retired, then yes, that's kind of goes into that sequence of returns. But if you've been retired for a while, let's go back and look at, okay, what happens during a recession? All right, well, business profits take a hit, unemployment rises, businesses cut back, shut down, prices fall, banks lend less. Okay, well, unemployment doesn't impact you because you're not employed, you're retired.
True.
Asset prices fall, but this is still a time, like always, to reassess your risk tolerance, make sure you're properly balanced, rebalance your buckets if you're using that bucket strategy. If you are not implementing the bucket strategy and you're taking out 5, 6, or 7, or even more of a percentage rate for withdrawals, you want to tackle your expenses. If we see a drop in the market that's sustainable for a long period of time and you're taking out a 7% withdrawal rate, that might not be sustainable for the next 15 or 20 years or how long you need to have your money last. So
with that in mind, then, I guess, is a recession a good thing for somebody who's comfortable in retirement?
I'm never going to say that recession is a good thing, but yeah, we have a lot of clients that have money that they're not going to touch for a long time. And so, or ever.
If ever.
Yeah. And so for those people, if you've got a steady income, whether it's from a pension or Social Security, and you've got assets that you're utilizing the bucket strategy and you feel confident that stocks are going to return over time, and you're not the type that worries about fluctuations in the market.
Which, by the way, good job, you little saver.
That's right. If that's you, recessions are a good time to take advantage of lower prices. If you've got a big ticket item that you need to buy or want to buy.
Car wash.
Not a car wash, but maybe a car if those go on sale. Maybe a vacation home if you're looking for them, because we know housing prices come down. Maybe a vacation, something that's a big ticket item that will be cheaper in a recession.
What kind of vacation are you taking?
Not one that has car washes in it. So I'm never going to say a recession is a good thing, but you can use it to your advantage, because if stocks are falling, well, this gives you time to rebalance and buy stocks as they're lower. And there are buying opportunities in a recession, not just with financial assets like stocks, but in things like vacations and, luxury things or leisure things that you
tangible items.
Yeah, tangible items, exactly. So you can look at it as a positive. I hate that every single news program always wants to scare everybody that a recession's on the way. It's just, and so many articles are going to tell you how to recession-proof your portfolio today. And it's just, I don't think that it's something that you need to rush to make all these major changes to your life, your portfolio. It's minor changes. It's preparing mentally for what could be a slowdown in the economy, and use this time to get ready to maybe take advantage of something that goes on sale. Not you.
Oh, I was like, I think that's a free pass.
No, it's not a free pass. But there are a lot of headlines that are going to provoke fear about a recession, and that it's
fear sells.
Fear sells, absolutely. And it's never going to end. The recession's, it's right around the corner, maybe, as the Wall Street Journal says.
Almost.
It's never going to end. And they're going to try to talk about all these things that you need to do. Like I said, you don't have to go out and run and do things. Recessions aren't fun, but they are necessary. I mean, having rampant inflation, for a long period of time would damage the economy. So we have to get that under control at some point. But the key is to prepare, and to do that, make sure you have an updated financial plan. If you don't have one, or you just want a second opinion on yours, or you just want to figure out how recession might impact you, or you want to have a conversation with Melissa about car washes, I don't know.
And why you need a service.
Click the link below. There's a link to our calendar to schedule a conversation. We'd be happy to help you. And before we get out of here, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Dad, I'm talking to you again, and all the millions and millions of listeners watching this and listening to this. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, don't just hit that subscribe button, but also hit that little 5-star button. Make sure all 5 of those stars, all 5 are filled out. And that way, when you're completed, it's a 5-star review, not a 4, a 5. We thank you for listening. I am Johnathan Rankin.
And I'm Melissa Rankin.
And this was the Retire Once Show.